both house mortgages. I can't buy this house and in any shape or form finance another house, no matter even if it's small.
Friends, it's me, Meerab, welcoming you once again to Starspill USA. And what you are about to hear is not merely gossip, nor the fleeting spectacle of reality television. Is the raw anatomy of a family torn apart, a dynasty crumbling in the very place where truth could no longer be swept beneath the rug. And as I begin to unfurl this tale for you in a single breathless sweep of words that shall stretch endlessly, I invite you to picture that courtroom not as a sterile chamber of law, but as an arena where the private wars of a family laid bare collided with the unflinching coldness of justice, a place where whispered sacrifices and buried betrayals rose like ghosts to haunt those who thought silence might protect them. And at the center of it all stood Meri Brown, not the quiet shadow history had painted her to be, but a woman finally shaking free of decades of dust, a woman who trembled only slightly as she told the judge, "Your Honor, I never consented. He deceived us all," and those words, simple in syllables, yet volcanic in their impact, cracked through the hush of the room like lightning on a still night, forcing every soul present to flinch as though a veil had been ripped from their eyes. And if you listen closely to the rhythm of that moment, you can almost hear the reporter's pens scratching faster. The shuffle of bodies leaning forward, the collective gasp of strangers who realized they were witnessing not just testimony, but the slow collapse of a man who once held himself as untouchable. For Kody Brown, who had strutted through years of polygamous pride and patriarchal command, now sat pale and trembling, his jaw clenched, his hands twitching at the desk before him, his eyes darting desperately from Meri to the judge and then to the press gallery as though searching for a lifeline that would not come. While beside him, Robyn, the so-called favored wife, the jewel of his later years, sat stiff as carved stone, her folded arms a brittle armor, her eyes avoiding Meri's piercing gaze, and if you caught the detail, you would see that her silence was not mere discomfort but the dread of a woman who perhaps had always known deep down that her rise came at another's erasure, and yet chose the easier sin of silence whenever truth pressed too closely against her comfort. And when the judge, with her gavel poised like a scepter, asked in measured tone, "Are you accusing Mr. Brown of marital fraud?" The words hung heavy in the rafters, pulling gasps from every throat, for this was no longer about spiritual unions or family squabbles, no longer the fodder of Sunday night episodes. This was the possibility of crime, of deceit weaponized in paperwork, of betrayal measured not only in broken hearts but in signatures and property lines. And Meri, her voice calm though her chest heaved with years of unspoken storms, said, "He told me it was paperwork, that it was nothing more than a technicality, that we would remain bound in all the ways that mattered. But I was not preserving my marriage. I was erasing myself, making space for the one he had already chosen." And those words, oh, those words, told like the death knell of illusion, each syllable a funeral bell for the decades she had labored beneath the weight of his choices. And around her, people gasped anew, hands pressed to mouths, heads shaking, unable to imagine the cruelty of a man who could smile for cameras while chiseling away his wife's worth with the casual brush of a pen. And then Meri's eyes locked upon Robyn, and she said, voice as sharp as broken glass, "I did it for you." And silence drowned the room heavier than thunder. For that single phrase unmasked every suspicion, every whispered accusation that had circled this family for years. And Robyn, her lips quivering, whispered barely, "I didn't know he did that." But Meri's stare, stripped of warmth, replied like a blade, "No, you didn't know a lot of things, did you?" And even the judge, who had seen storms of human tragedy within those walls, faltered, her lips pressing into a line as though she too had felt the sting. And then came the manila folder, creased, weathered, stuffed with papers not only of ink, but of hidden blood, sweat, tears. Meri slid a page toward the bailiff, her finger trembling yet certain, and her voice declared, "This is the grant for Coyote Pass. My name is not here. Robyn's is, and the page, once an ordinary document, now fell upon the courtroom like a guillotine's blade, cutting away the pretense of unity, for here lay proof that the man had funneled land, wealth, legacy, not to the wives who built him, but to the chosen one who benefited quietly in the glow of favoritism." And as Meri's voice rose steadier now, liberated in the fury of truth, she said, "He showed the world unity, but behind closed doors he built something different. He funneled money, shifted property, and pitted us against one another. He wasn't preserving a family, he was dismantling one." And in that instant, Kody shifted in his seat, his face crimson, his composure fraying, his hands quivering as though the strings of control had finally snapped, while Robyn sat hollowed out. Her silence not protective but damning, mascara bleeding in dark streams upon her cheeks. Her trembling hands gripping wood as though to keep herself from collapsing. And when the judge asked softly, yet with weight, "What do you want today, Miss Brown?" Meri answered without hesitation, "Acknowledgement, accountability, and a fair share of what I helped build for over 2 decades. And though those words sought justice, it was the next question that chilled the marrow of every listener. For the judge leaned forward, her voice low, dangerous in its simplicity. "Do you believe Robyn was a part of this deception?" And in that second, time itself seemed to hold breath, for the gallery froze, even the air stilled. And Meri's eyes, unflinching, declared, "I believe she was both a victim and an accomplice. Perhaps not at first, but she knew she was being exalted while we were being erased." She said nothing, and as those words thundered across silence, Robyn's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, her very body shrinking as though exposed to a light too bright, while Kody, the patriarch, the self-proclaimed leader, boiled crimson, his jaw clenching and unclenching, his eyes darting with the fury of a man trapped in the wreckage of his own lies. And then the judge commanded, "Miss Brown, take the stand." And all eyes shifted as Robyn rose with the stiffness of dread, each step weighted with a lifetime of choices, her blouse sagging as though she had diminished inside herself, her mascara smeared into rivers of guilt. And as she placed her hand upon the Bible, her knuckles whitened. And in the gallery no one dared to breathe, for what hovered in the silence was not just a question of law, but the fate of a family, the cracking of a dynasty, the collapse of a myth. And though the night of testimony stretched long and the words poured like an unbroken tide, every detail deepened the chasm to memories of Christmases where Meri sat alone while Robyn's children were paraded as precious. The bank statements that revealed money siphoned into accounts where other wives' names were absent. The land deeds marked with Robyn's signature like a brand of possession. The whispered phone calls Christine recalled, the tears Janelle described, the countless moments where silence was demanded in the name of unity but delivered only erasure, all of this spilled, unrelenting, through the hours like storm rain upon parched earth, until the courtroom itself seemed drenched in revelation. And as the cameras outside flashed and fans screamed and critics tweeted furiously, inside those walls it became clear that what was ending was not only a marriage but an empire. For Kody Brown sat no longer as patriarch but as a man exposed. Robyn trembled, not as favored wife but as accomplice cornered by truth. And Meri, rising from years of silence, finally stood tall as the voice of every erased soul. Her testimony not only a demand for fairness, but a requiem for illusions. And so the tale unspooled without mercy, without pause, without reprieve. Rolling onward and onward like a single unbroken tide of words, long, endless, heavy with truth until the very air in that courtroom seemed to buckle beneath the weight of revelation. And though hours became days and days became the measure of justice itself, the storm did not relent, for once silence had been broken, it could never be bound again. And so this, dear friends, is where we stand, in the ashes of pretense, in the glare of truth, in the long, suffocating, liberating monologue of Meri Brown, who refused to be erased, who spoke for herself and for all the wives erased in the name of a man's ego. Her words spilling, soaring, flooding through history like a river that could never again be dammed and be damned.
Like, why in the world would I want to be tied to somebody eternally who doesn't want me? And this is what I can't understand.
Kody's hand brushed lightly against her wrist, not forceful, not demanding, but tentative, as though hoping to tether her to him for just one fleeting instant before she drifted entirely beyond his reach. She did not look at him, did not so, much as flick her gaze in his direction. Instead, she rose with aching slowness, every movement taut, as though invisible wires pulled her upright with the cruel inevitability of fate. The silence that descended over the courtroom was thick, suffocating, a silence so absolute that even the whir of the cameras seemed to falter, their lenses holding their breath, waiting for the first fracture, the first tear to fall, the first syllable to splinter the stillness. She lifted her hand, whispered the oath in a voice that trembled yet carried its own quiet power, and lowered herself into the witness chair as though the very weight of her own story pressed down upon her shoulders. The judge leaned forward, eyes dark, voice crisp as she cut through the silence. "Miss Brown, you've heard Meri's testimony. Do you wish to reply?" Robyn's lips quivered. She bent toward the microphone, the metal glinting like a blade under the fluorescent lights. I don't even know where to begin." Her throat worked painfully, her words barely emerging. "It's not as though I orchestrated this. I didn't want any of this to happen. When I came into this family, I truly believed that I was stepping into something sacred, something eternal." Her voice cracked, shattering into fragments that echoed in the hushed chamber. "But instead, I stepped into a battlefield." A murmur rippled through the gallery, a current of disbelief and hushed agreement colliding. Kody turned his face away, jaw set in stone, while Robyn pressed on, her voice gathering strength with each confession. "I believed they welcomed me. I believed they wanted me here. I thought I was part of something united, something pure. But what I didn't understand, what no one told me, was that I had been placed upon a pedestal I never asked for." The judge's brow arched, her tone measured, probing. "Are you saying Mr. Brown treated you differently?" Robyn hesitated, her chest rising and falling like a storm barely contained. Then, for the first time that day, she turned and looked directly at Kody, her eyes sharp as glass. "Yes, from the very beginning, he did. He treated me as though I were his last chance, his reward, his proof that he was still worthy. And no matter how often I begged him to be fair, to give his time equally, to hold his other wives as dearly as he once had, ignored me. He told me again and again that they no longer wanted him, that they despised me, that jealousy had poisoned their hearts." Her fists clenched, nails pressing into her palms as she turned toward Meri, her voice breaking with urgency. "But I tried, Meri. I swear I tried. I urged him to go to you, to Janelle, to Christine. I pleaded with him to remember that he was husband to more than just me. But instead, he turned cold, dismissive, furious. And slowly I realized I wasn't his beloved. I wasn't even his partner. I was his weapon." The room erupted in gasps, reporters scribbling furiously, cameras snapping like gunfire. Kody stiffened, color draining from his face, while the judge's voice cut sharply through the uproar. "Miss Browner, you saying Mr. Brown used his relationship with you as a tool against his other wives?" Robyn's silence stretched, taught a pause so long it threatened to snap. Then, at last, she nodded slowly, deliberately. "Yes, Your Honor. I see it clearly now. He used me not to love, but to divide. He wielded our marriage like a blade, driving it between himself and the others. And I was too blind to recognize it at the time. But before the stillness could settle again, Meri's lawyer rose, binder in hand, his voice cutting like a guillotine. Miss Brown, are you aware that in the last 5 years, over 75% of the Brown family's combined financial assets have flowed into your household alone? Robyn's head snapped back, eyes wide. What? The lawyer stepped forward, his words heavy with accusation. Bank statements, tax filings, property deeds. Time and again, your name and Kody's appear side by side. While Meri, Janelle, and Christine were slowly severed not only from their husband, but from their financial future. It was as if the breath had been knocked clean from her lungs. Robyn's lips parted soundlessly, her hands trembling against the wood of the stand. I thought Tit was a family trust, she whispered, the words tasting of ash. Kody told me he was handling it. He told me not to worry. Meri's voice, sharp and unrelenting, cut through the gallery like an arrow. Exactly. Every time we asked, we were silenced with the same refrain. Don't worry, Robyn's handling it. But what we didn't understand we could never have imagined was that Robyn became the gatekeeper. Every decision, every dollar, every promise passed through you. I didn't know. Robyn cried, rising suddenly from her seat, the desperation in her tone undeniable. I swear to you all, I didn't know. I never asked for this. Never. Then where did you think the money came from? Meri snapped, her voice sharp as shattered glass. The boutiques, the renovations, the acres of land. Did you truly believe it all came from your small ventures? Robyn froze. And in that silence, the temperature of the room seemed to plummet. Kody's lawyer barked objection, relevance. But the judge's gavel cracked once, echoing like thunder. Overruled. Continue. Robyn sank back into her chair, her words now little more than breath. I asked him again and again about the land. He always said not to worry, that everything was divided fairly, that every wife would have her portion. But now? Her eyes welled with tears as she turned to the judge, broken. Now I see. I wasn't just complicit, I was his shield. He manipulated me, used me to keep the others at bay. And when the anger came, when the questions grew too sharp, he made me the scapegoat. The judge's gaze hardened. Miss Brown, are you testifying under oath that you were not a knowing participant in Mr. Brown's financial dealings? Yes, Robyn breathed. I was deceived, just like them. The silence that followed was unbearable. Seconds crawled past like hours until suddenly, Kody exploded from his chair. Nuff. His voice thundered, raw with fury. Sit down, Mr. Brown, the judge barked. But he ignored her, eyes blazing as he glared at the women who once bore his name. They hated Robyn from the very beginning. He roared. She was the only one who respected me. The only one. Who stood by me? And you, he jabbed a finger in Meri's direction, though he could not meet her eyes. You abandoned me long before I ever abandoned you. You just lacked the courage to say it aloud. His chest heaved as he spun. Toward Robyn, betrayal painted across his face. And you, after everything I gave you, after everything I sacrificed you, betray me now. Robyn's voice cut like whispered thunder, trembling yet fierce. You didn't do it for me, Kody. You did it for yourself. You never wanted love. You wanted loyalty. And I destroyed myself trying to be both. The judge's gavel fell again, silencing the chaos. Her voice was cool, controlled, carrying the weight of authority. This case has moved beyond assets, beyond contracts. What lies before us is not merely division of property, but a legacy of manipulation, deception, and the corrosion of trust. And this court will not tolerate the exploitation of faith or family as a disguise for control. She leaned back, eyes steely. Further documentation will be required, particularly concerning Coyote Pass. This hearing is adjourned until then, but as Kody slumped into his chair, his face pale and shadowed, it was clear that the tide had turned. The very land he had once called their promised future Coyote Pass was about to be exposed, not as a dream, but as the crime scene.
Takes her, it essentially becomes the owner of her.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, it's stupid.
So I got to this child custody thing and I just started getting...
The question did not merely land in the courtroom. It cut through it, sharp as a blade forged to draw blood. Mr. Brown, the attorney's voice carried, crisp and unflinching, echoing off the wooden walls. Did you deliberately divert family money and retitle property into Robyn Brown's name without the consent or approval of the other women in your so-called spiritual marriages? For a long-waited pause, Kody said nothing. Silence pressed heavy on every chest in that chamber. His lips parted, his shoulders stiffened, his fingers twitched against the railing as though clutching for balance. His breath came shallow, scraping the air, a man teetering between defiance and collapse. Then almost too soft to catch. Yes. The word slipped like a stone into a still pond, sending ripples of shock in every direction. Gasps rustled across the benches. A woman in the gallery slapped her hand over her mouth. Even Robyn blinked, eyes wide as if the ground beneath her. Feet had shifted, cracking apart. Kody's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. Louder now, with the defiance of a man cornered, he repeated, "Yes." But it was not theft. It was strategy. He leaned forward, gripping the rail until his knuckles whitened. They were not cooperating. We needed progress. So I proceeded with the one wife who was loyal to me. The word loyal detonated in the air. Gasps, murmurs, a ripple of disbelief. Meri's face remained impassive, carved of stone, not a flicker of emotion. But Robyn's head turned slowly, inexorably towards him. Her lips trembled, her voice broke the silence like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Loyal. Kody's eyes darted from her to the judge, his tone rising, desperate, defensive. I have dedicated my entire life to keeping this family intact. Every time I made a choice, they fought me, they questioned me, they resisted. You cannot lead a family like that. Someone had to take charge. The attorney rose, movements deliberate, voice slicing like a scalpel. Mr. Brown, you are confirming, in your own words, that you seized joint finances and redistributed property without consultation. Yes, and that you did so under your own assumption, your personal judgment that your other wives no longer deserved equal ownership because you deemed them disloyal. Yes, the answer came blunt, unvarnished, no remorse, no apology, only exhaustion. Yet beneath the exhaustion lurked something darker: entitlement. The attorney's eyes narrowed. Then let us, Mr. Brown, discuss this so-called loyalty. We have further evidence. He turned towards the bench. Your Honor, permission to play a voicemail left by Mr. Brown for a family financial planner 2 years ago. The judge inclined her head. Proceed. A crackle filled the courtroom. And then Kody's voice emerged flat, cold, transactional. They're finished. Christine's done. Janelle's next. Meri's of no consequence. Just concentrate the funding on Robyn's side. She and I are the only ones who care about tomorrow. The words hung like smoke. A woman in the gallery gasped audibly, her cry puncturing the silence, and then the room froze once more. Robyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes flooding with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. The judge turned sharply. "Miss Brown, were you aware of this message?" Robyn shook her head violently, voice cracking. "No, I didn't know. He was making financial choices like this. I thought we were still fighting for the family together. I thought..." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought we were still together." Her gaze snapped to Kody. Fierce now. "You made me the villain. You told me they hated me. You said they didn't want me. Never told me you were erasing them." Kody leaned forward, face flushed, words tumbling out like fire. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed watching my family dissolve?" Christine walked away. Janelle checked out. Meri cared more about her business than our home. The only one who stood with me, was you. His voice cracked, raw. At least I thought so. But Robyn did not crumble, did not soften. Her eyes, usually brimming with tears and devotion, were cold, steady, unflinching. For the first time, she did not look at him as her husband. She looked at him as a stranger, one she no longer recognized. The attorney's voice cut through, again. So your answer to a dissolving marriage was to seize the money, to strip these women of finances, to cut them off because they had the courage to challenge you. They left me first, Kody barked, chest heaving. The attorney's words sliced clean. Did they leave, or did you drive them away with control and favoritism? Kody's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The judge's gavel cracked against the block, sharp as thunder. This court does not weigh matters of spiritual loyalty, Mr. Brown. It weighs matters of law. You were entrusted with joint finances. You diverted them in secrecy. That is called fiduciary betrayal. Kody blinked rapidly, panic flickering across his face. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice as steady and unyielding as stone. You justified these choices based on loyalty, not legality. That is not merely morally hollow, it is legally actionable. At that moment, Robyn surged to her feet. Her whole body shook, but her voice rang clear across the chamber. Your Honor, I must speak. The judge regarded her with piercing eyes. Miss Brown, you are under oath. Choose your words carefully. Robyn's voice trembled, but grew stronger with every syllable. I didn't know what he was doing. If I had, I would have stopped it. I thought he was fair. I defended him to my children, to the family, to the world. But he wasn't fair. He was manipulative, cold, calculating. He told me they were the problem, that they had turned their backs. He poisoned us, them, all of us against each other, and now I see it. He poisoned me too. The silence that followed was suffocating. The air itself seemed to pause. Even pens froze mid-scratch. Finally, the judge spoke, voice heavy, grave. This case is no longer a domestic quarrel. It is no longer about failed love. It is about deception, exploitation, and financial misconduct, draped in the costume of spiritual authority. Kody bolted upright, fists slamming against the table. I did what I had to do. The gavel cracked again. Sit down, Mr. Brown. His knees buckled. He slumped back into his chair, drained of strength, the fight slipping from his fingers. Meri rose slowly, silently. She did not speak. She merely looked at him. Her face bore no triumph, no scorn, not even anger. What lingered was far more. Devastating pity. The judge's voice carried through the silence. This court will reconvene for final decisions on restitution and the question of fraud charges. Till then, all parties are ordered to stand down. And I strongly recommend mediation, though I suspect resolution may be beyond reach. Words lingered in the air like a tolling bell, each syllable heavy with finality. Outside, the world already knew. Reporters thronged the courthouse steps, lights flashing, microphones poised. Fans of Sister Wives packed the sidewalks, waving placards. Justice for Meri. Kody the Khan. Free Robyn. The noise swelled like a storm about to break. Inside, the judge pored over files swollen with testimony, bank statements, voice recordings, every scrap of evidence woven into a tapestry of betrayal. And at the center of it sat Kody Brown, once the proud patriarch of 4 wives, 18 children, and millions of television viewers. Now, just another defendant waiting for the gavel. Beside him, Robyn sat hollow-eyed, her shoulders hunched, as though under invisible weight. Across from them, Meri sat ramrod straight, unbending, her silence sharper than any word. The years of silence, sacrifice, and secrets had reached their end. And when the gavel fell, next it would not merely close a case. It would close an era, friends. This chapter closes here, but the story never truly ends. Every twist, every truth, every heartbreak shapes the journey of the Brown family in ways we are still uncovering. If you've stood with me through this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next revelation may be even more shocking than the last. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay kind, and remember, truth always finds its way to the surface.